It's All right, welcome everybody to the Blowback Roundtable. It feels like deja vu because we just did this 10 minutes ago, but I forgot to hit the go live button. So we were talking for a good 10 minutes and then we realized, oh, we're still not even live. But so we're live now. We got into the Gonzalo Lira thing pretty deeply. But yeah, this is our 6th episode of the Blowback Roundtable. Specifically, this episode, we were going to focus on Africa and also the Gonzalo Lira saga. So it's very interesting what's going on with Gonzalo Lira. I'm going to bore Ben and Carlo here as I restate everything we just have been discussing for the last 10 minutes. So essentially, Gonzalo found himself on the ground in Kharkov when the special military operation began, and he started, live streaming and YouTubing from inside of Kharkov when, you could hear artillery landing around him and stuff like that. It was very riveting, and his opinions were excellent, and it was something that we do not get to see on the television because of censorship and, the monolithic narrative shoved down our throats by the establishment media. So he got a lot of traction real quick. A lot of people started watching him, and that's not to say he has a perfect understanding of everything or that he's a principled, what should I say? Ideologically principled.
This situation is not about his flaws. It's just not. It's about
right.
What. I'll let you finish.
So he, his opinions on the SMO were excellent and they were correct, and it got him in a lot of hot water, right? So the SBU came and visited him. They told him, you can't leave Kharkov. I think they might have confiscated his passport. There was an unfortunate episode where that caused some enmity between Gonzalo and Scott Ritter when Scott said, I hope he's not dead, and then I think Gonzalo took it the wrong way or something and thought that Scott said he was dead, killed by the Kraken unit. And that caused some enmity. It was just a weird thing. And I felt bad because it was like a misunderstanding. Like Scott really didn't say anything inappropriate or wrong. It was just, there's a lot of rivalry, social media rivalry going on, it seems, regarding, all the different opinions with the SMO and everything. But
so let me jump in from your last point all the way going back to the first. So the last point is Scott Ritter. I just recently watched, I think it was a yesterday live stream with Danny Haifong and Scott Ritter. And he clarified it that maybe I don't want to have good relations with him. I don't want to have talks with him. Doesn't mean I want him to die. I want him to live, see his children. I don't want any harm to come to him. I hope he's all right. The beginning thing you stated was just slightly wrong because he was actually in Kiev the day the SMO started. And then he moved down to Kharkov, Kharkiv, whatever you prefer. It will be Kharkov. I mean, that's pretty much undisputed at this point. But as for his flaws, this man, for those who don't know, he was one of these, it was called Coach Red Pill with some following on social media accounts, which was this a classical right-wing, culture war type of person. He was Chilean, so he loved Pinochet, and he said communists should be taken for helicopter rides, which means dropping them out, which Pinochet did. And none of that mattered last February when the SMO started, because he immediately, rather, I think, sharply came to the right side of the facts. And that, it appears, was a crime in Kiev. He wasn't arrested for any kind of harming anybody, for physical or damage to anything. It was for saying his opinion, which was, warm to the Russian side. It took the Russian side into account. Apparently, that's a crime. And I think that's where this whole discussion should begin, because he was just expressing an opinion from Kharkov on different people, like George Galloway's show. He was on the Duran Boys show. And people featured him just for that. It's not about his views. It's not about his flaws. It's about this.
Yeah, no, for sure.
50-year-old man who looked physically and mentally, let's just use stressed in the videos and the 25-point Twitter thread that he posted about 17 hours ago. And apparently he was on the border to Hungary. And I haven't seen anything from him since then. I tried to reach out. He doesn't allow DMs on his Twitter, so I hope he got my mention. We'll see. Go. Sorry.
Well, I was working my way there. So the SBU arrested him. It led to that little fallout with Scott Ritter, which I think was just a misunderstanding. But and he stayed in Kharkov, and he kept streaming. And he was a real good facilitator of dialogue. He would have roundtables like us, and he had access. He had access to the real popular streamers, the good analysts, whatever that word is. So he would have Brian Berletic. He would have, Scott. Well, I don't know about Scott Ritter, but Martinov and the Duran guys. So he would have an ever-changing, members on the roundtable, and he would get them together. And it was really, he did a good job. But he continued to do that even after he was arrested. And then finally, it seems that they had enough. And so they arrested him again. And that was the second time he went offline. And then we didn't hear from him for several months until last night.
Yeah.
And we learned that, we had assumed he was in prison ever since. But apparently he was in prison for a short time. He was abused a little bit. He talked about it in his videos from the border that he just posted last night. But he was released on bail, and he chose himself not to engage in social media over the last several months. So it wasn't because he was incarcerated. But now that he has his arraignment scheduled for tomorrow, he was trying to get out of the country because, in his words, he thought it was a very high likelihood if he attended that arraignment, he would end up being, dying in a Ukrainian labor camp, which I don't think is that far-fetched at all. I think that's quite possibly true.
No, that was his ruling. He actually posted it in Ukrainian and a translation in provided by the court, an English translation of the paperwork. So that so far is a fact of this case. But go on.
The ruling was what? Say that again.
The ruling was that for the crime of, I guess, justifying the Russian invasion, that was the crime. His punishment would be, 7 or 8 years.
Okay.
What do they call it? A working prison. Something like that was the wording. Yeah.
The chance of surviving that might not be very high. I mean, so he wouldn't, we wouldn't want to wish that on our worst enemy. So we haven't heard from him ever since. So at the border, he published 3 separate 15-minute long video clips explaining in great detail what's been going on for the last several months. Very, very interesting, heartfelt. You could see that he was stressed out. He didn't look that good, but I thought he carried himself well considering the circumstances. He showed some courage, and you could really see that it was a stressful situation. So it was very riveting viewing for me. But we don't know. Yeah, we don't know what the result of that is yet. Just because we haven't heard from him in almost 20 hours doesn't necessarily mean he's not gonna succeed in escaping, but it's still one of those things that's up in the air. I did want to also point out that his dad was on George Galloway's show couple months ago after he had disappeared, and that was another real great interview to watch. And his dad did a really good job.
It was incredibly moving. That interview was incredibly moving, I think. Yeah.
And contextualizing the entire situation, and just you could see that how much love his dad had for him, and so I'm sure his dad was happy to see him alive at the border, because I don't think he knew what was going on with him, just like none of us did. But it's definitely a thing that it's hard to not care about. It's hard to not follow. It might not have the greatest importance as far as relevance for the geopolitical future of the world, but it's real interesting, and it shows the hypocrisy of the U.S. it shows the the what would I say, evilness evilness of the Ukraine regime, that they want to. I mean, it's kind of understandable. I mean, any society in a state of war is going to have to engage in censorship, but any country would. I believe that I'm sure Russia, although not as draconian, has cracked down on some anti-Russian speech. So propaganda is just an aspect of the war, but you would like them just to kick him out, right? Don't kill him, just kick him out of the country. That's all you got to do. But because they don't like what he's saying, they don't like that he has a platform, they probably would rather silence him.
Well, take a little wider perspective. First of all, while he was waiting to be arraigned, why didn't he have a system for escaping then? Because all he has to do is look at what's happened to Assange, what's happened to that gentleman, I can't remember his name offhand, the Venezuelan, who was simply trying to feed his own people.
I remember.
Not Valdez.
No. Oh, I'm blanking on the name too, but I know exactly.
But that as much fanfare that has come about around Assange, he still is not free, and so that should have put the dire consequences of what Lira's situation was into his head. Now, I want to say something about the people that Moscow is locking up. Well, they're locking them up because they want to go in and turn Ukraine into a cinder. That's the base. That's most of the people because they're against the Putin government because they're going into Ukraine too light. They want them to go in heavy, and to use a mafia expression, better come heavy. And so that's why most of them are being removed from the street, because that's a direct affront. And on the opposite side of what say the West would interpret, essentially people who want to get the truth out or develop something toward a lasting peace. That's who they're eliminating, because they don't want peace. So there's that difference.
Yeah, there is that difference. In Russia, by the way, the other type that's being rounded up is SBU cells who were planning terrorist attacks, like has happened last night on Moscow. That's just a drone attack, which was obviously stopped by Russia, as it always has. But I just want to go back for a second to, I'd like to make two appeals. Gonzalo, on the minuscule chance that you're watching, I reached out on Twitter. I couldn't DM you. I don't know exactly how to reach you. But if you want to tell your side of the story, of course we have questions. But we would be glad to just have you talk your way through it and just let it all out. Second, I would like to appeal to Prime Minister Orban on the even lesser chance that he would watch us on our Tuesday mini show. Come on, give this guy a break. You've showed some backbone. I'm not going to say all of your decisions were right, but foreign policy-wide, you seem to grasp the situation. Give this man asylum. Give him a break. He's suffered enough.
And I want to say, Gonzalo made it explicitly clear in his videos on the border that he doesn't know anybody in Hungary, and I immediately did think of Ben, and kind of as a joke, I thought Ben should go and meet him at the border.
I'm in the Southwest, unfortunately, and I sold my car 2 years ago, but quite immobile. But yeah, I'll meet you in Budapest if you want.
But yeah, so as far as networking in Hungary, reach out to Ben, and he can definitely put you in touch with people or get you some food and shelter at the very least.
Easily, yes.
And hopefully, there'll be pressure on the Orban government to do as you suggested, to offer him asylum. I mean, there's no doubt that he's being persecuted just for his speech. But that does bring up the bigger question of, there's the liberal narrative, and then there's the materialist, scientific, socialist approach to principles. So the liberal principle is, hey, we support free speech and we are in favor of free speech. And when liberals say that, they don't really mean it, right? It's a lie.
Yeah, except if it's wrong speech. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the fact is that speech has to be regulated. In a society that has a large conglomeration of people, you can't just let everybody say anything at any time, at any place. Like, you always have to have restrictions on time, place, and the kinds of things they can say. So it's like liberalism isn't based in anything. It's an idealist ideology that is not real. It just sounds good, and it really is designed to, just to maintain the status quo. That's all it does. But what really needs to happen is that speech needs to be regulated principally, like in furtherance of truth and reality. And it's not a good idea for China, for instance, to allow Western billionaires to come in and buy up all the media platforms and then utilize those media platforms and weaponize them against the people of China and against the government of China. So China doesn't allow that. So they have restrictions. They regulate it. And that's necessary. And it's good. So this idea that China's bad because they regulate speech, and they don't, number one, they don't regulate speech any more than they do in the West. The West does it too. The West just lies about it. The West just pretends that they don't. They pretend they care about free speech, whereas China's up front. Yeah, we regulate it because you're not going to say, we're not going to give you a platform to weaponize speech against our country, against our people, against our government. So
I had no idea that we were going to go in this direction, but I love it because that is the People's Republic had, you would call them the draconian national security laws, but it's the same in Hungary today. If you speak or organize to overthrow the government, I think that's most of the world, that is illegal. That is simply illegal. So that's what liberalism, what it does, it gives you this performative feel good. You're going to wear a T-shirt saying "Save Africa," "Save Darfur." You remember, it wasn't that long ago. And I feel like a good person, but cancel that guy. That's a Nazi. That's a whatever word, and don't deplatform everybody else. And with that good feeling, these snakes. I watched Comrade Caleb Maupin from CPI. You might know him. He's interacted with Scott Ritter, which is a really good development. And he talked about this, that the traditional conservatives, who I think I can rightly say Carlo hates, most of them, so do I, at least they were honest. We want this, fuck that, and that's it. But this is much more the new, this kind of liberal world order around the Biden stuff is very sneaky, very manipulative. It will manipulate into certain feelings why they'll do the dirty, horrible stuff that they've always done.
NGOs. Yeah.
For example, all of the NGOs, all of them. You
don't have to say anything. There's thousands of them. And it's so easy to suss them out because as soon as you see their page on the internet, all you have to do is look who's funding them. And
Brian Beletic's biggest lesson in life was, for me, always check out the sponsors.
Always check out. Yeah, a couple of keystrokes, and you can find out who's funding them. And it's the NED, that's National Endowment for Democracy. I know this has been repeated thousands of times, and the USAID, whatever the
most of the time, Samantha Power.
Basically, they're doing what the CIA used to do clandestinely. They're doing publicly now, and they're doing it in the name of free speech. So they turn the notion of free speech on its head, and free just means lies, and you can there's all kinds of internal logics with different nations why they limit free speech, and in the West that's all distorted in the fact that they don't allow it, and their propaganda is we do, which they don't. And I think I'm still amazed by the fact that polls show that very few people trust the U.S. media, not just fractional. Yet when there's a situation like Ukraine, they come out, they're all bleeding hearts, and they're all basically just parroting what the propaganda is that's coming out from the deep state, if you will. So, but I do want to. At this point, I want to congratulate Ukraine on blocking Sweden's
Hungary.
entry into NATO. Yes, I'm sorry. Geez, I want to thank Hungary. Thank you, dear, for blocking Sweden's entry into NATO. And now I've blown my line, but there will be cake.
No, that's a fair point. And yeah, Ura, well done. By the way, it's not something that Orban did because his party, the Fidesz, didn't even go into vote. They said, fuck this vote. And the rest of the people said, no, we're in the current position, we're not going to do this. Carlo, since you're in the belly of the beast, I wonder, I know that everything was dressed up in yellow and blue flags. Are there many left for it? Because in Hungary, for about a week, last February, there were little candle lights and flags around, and they all disappeared. We're too close to this to be absolutely swept up by the Western propaganda. Luckily, most of the people have just, nope, none of that flag shit, none of that. They learned about Bandera very quickly. What about Washington? Are there still many of those flags around?
Well, unfortunately, because of my health issues, I haven't been able to get out much.
Oh.
But my impression is it's still, people have their lives. There's two kinds of people living in Washington. There are basically the native Washingtonians, people who have been here for generations, and they tend to be African American. And
no flags there.
It's called Chocolate City. And with Ukraine, I never really heard much discussion, but I think a lot of them were sort of faked out. They want to play along. There's a large Hispanic or Latino population here now, and I don't think they care one way or another. They're too busy, earning a living. They tend to have been at, well, I don't want to say this as a fact, but evangelical organizations have helped them get where they get. I mean, I've talked to them and they go, well, I'm going to church now, and they'll kind of abashedly say, it's not Catholic, it's not Catholic, and I go, yeah, I know, it's evangelical, it's Southern Baptist or something like that. But then there's the hardcore people that come. They're very sophisticated. They come from all over the country, all over the world. We talked about Ed Litvak, and they have a stake in all of this. That you have the K Street lobbyists. There's hundreds of them around. They live very, very comfortable lives. As I've stated before, 7 of the 11 richest counties in the United States are around Washington, D.C.
Wow.
So those people are in on the lie, and they know they're lying. But I would say the general population is still, that although mostly it's white people, are still basically virtue signaling about Ukraine. There's very little change. I recently did have a conversation. I mentioned the Accords and the two Minsk Accords, and the person didn't know what they were. And this is an educated white person. Didn't know.
Yeah, this conflict has been going on for 10 years. Interesting.
So By the way, it's the I'm sorry. The propaganda is so deep and so severe that people don't know, or they don't want to know, or even if they do know, they don't accept it. Putin is a devil. So
I wanted to say something to that regard. This is not NAFO, those blind idiots, Paul Massaro and that, but I think Alexander Mercouris recently said that about one of these, the Telegraph, the British, they're rabid. Telegraph, Guardian, the supposed lefty journal, are incredibly rabid on Ukraine, and every Russian should die. It's just horrible. He talked about Richard Kemp in the same light, because he probably knows what's going on, but he has no other choice than to push the shit he's been pushing for almost 2 years now. So he's one of those who's probably not dim, but he has no choice now. He's
Who's Richard Kemp, Ben?
Richard Kemp is for the I don't know, a year and a half. Every one of the headlines that you saw in the Kiev Post or from Kiev Intelligence, including the Ghost of Kiev, Babushka.
Okay. So he's one of the biggest Western propagandist that's given
winning. Russia's running out of everything. Okay. There's no rockets.
So God bless you for weighing into that.
And for 2 weeks now, he's been saying things don't look that good, but we can still win. We can resume this thing in the winter if it stalls in the autumn, maybe next year, but things aren't looking that good. That's what he's been saying.
So we're seeing some changes.
Yes.
But our overarching theme here is a battle of narratives, and I mean that's a good it's a good thing to really focus on. So because it's related to what happened with Gonzalo. He was not on the correct narrative. And in the West, where they talk about we have freedom of speech. It's just interesting that every single platform of mass communication is in lockstep, shoving one and only one narrative down your throat. You do not see any dissent to that narrative. You've got to go to social media to see dissent to that narrative. And we also know that they're regulating social media. They're throttling people and they're shadow banning people, and they're trying to limit, the effectiveness of social media in spreading, spreading narratives that run counter to the official narrative.
And one more shot has been fired in that war. I don't know if you've read just the big story last week. Was Nigel Farage, like him, dislike him, it doesn't matter. One of the Brexiter British MPs. He was debanked, not just deplatformed, from Facebook or YouTube, wherever. He was debanked, and it came out that it was because of shit he said, not because he doesn't have money.
Well, so that's the latest. Was not just debanked, right?
No, he was decountryed
and defreedomed. Yeah. And as he's going to be delived very soon, probably. The U.S. wants to delive him. They want to, send him from Britain into the U.S. so they can get some torture in on him. It's the hypocrisy is astounding. And again, it's just nobody has the excuse to think even unconsciously that the West cares about these principles or that they promote freedom or democracy. Like, nobody really should have the excuse to still believe that nonsense that just looks at what's going on.
But what you're up against is the material stake that a lot of people have. Now, here in Washington, it's intense because there's a huge population. They live in Chevy Chase. They live in Bethesda. They live in Northern Virginia. They live in McLean, where the CIA is.
To support the false narrative.
Let me add one more, because I know it's Foggy Bottom. I know it because that's where the State Department is, isn't it?
Yes, that's downtown. Now, if you've got a mortgage, if you've got a $3 million mortgage on your 6-bedroom house, and you work for the State Department, you say what the State Department says you want to say. Otherwise, you're out. Now, that's a level. That's a kind of level you can understand why people will lie. It's not. I'm not condoning the lies, but you can grasp that.
Yeah.
But if you go 2 hours outside of Washington D.C. to resume speed Virginia or resume speed West Virginia or Southern Pennsylvania, you're going to get people that just don't know what's going on, and they accept the lies that the people in Washington and that promote, so that you have a different kind of stake. It's I'm an American, whatever America say, America, love it or leave it, all that crap. So, and there, I got to tell you, we went up to do a performance in West Virginia, and we used what's that, GPS? Yeah. And it took us a circuitous route through some of the most devastated hovels I've seen outside of the third world. And I guarantee you, if we had dared to stop and ask these people what they thought of their lives, they would think their lives were great. They would think that America was great. America was the best. Now that doesn't eliminate them from getting on Democratic politicians or whatever. It's because they generally tend to be conservative, but still that core sense of the might and the power behind the United States is still there, and just kind of ugly as ever. And so it's not going to be very easy to weed out. So Just want to throw that in.
There's two kinds of indoctrination, broadly speaking, among the Western working class. There's the blue indoctrination and the red indoctrination. And so the blue indoctrination is the one that's in power now. It's stronger. It's the one, in control of the levers of power and trying to figure out how to maintain Western imperialism, to maintain U.S. hegemony throughout the rest of the 21st century. And they're weaponizing the liberalism, and identity politics and things like that in an effort to, maintain their power. So they're using liberalism for decidedly illiberal means. But
that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
I mean,
I'm trying to understand the question from the commenter. Why is who out?
So I think he's talking about Gonzalo Lira. So he might have shown up late. We tried to cover that in the first 10 minutes, but essentially, if you guys go to Gonzalo Lira again, his YouTube channel, he posted 3 50-minute videos on the border with Hungary, explaining everything from his perspective. So check that out.
Or his Twitter for a 25-piece thread.
Yeah. 25. If it's even called Twitter anymore, 25 posts there. So, but yeah, essentially he was trying to. He was going to be arraigned tomorrow by Ukraine, and he was thinking that he better get out before he ends up in a forced labor camp for the next 7 years.
Right.
I think what he's asking is, why was he out on bail? Now,
and we have questions. It's strange.
He got out on bail.
He got his both.
According to him, he was out on bail.
He was out on bail. He managed to pay that because he had connections with money. It doesn't matter. But he was not supposed to. He got both of his passports, Chilean and US passports, back. He also got all the registrations for his, I think, multiple motorbikes, which wasn't also supposed to happen. So yeah, we got questions. Doesn't matter. We want to listen to what he has to say if he's in my country. But as for the title of the video, we can shift away slightly to the main point we were making, to how it's resulted in Africa. And that to me was absolutely fascinating. I mean, we can go into the details later, but first I'm going to give you my take, because it's what we've been talking about. This liberalism as a scam to attack people, to overthrow governments, to fuck up people of the third world has become apparent. One of my favorite interviews of all time, my friend says that he became my spirit animal, was between Lukashenko, the leader of Belarus, and a fucking BBC swine reporter. And he slaughtered that guy verbally. It was beautiful. He said, all of your little NGOs, I think he used the word, we're going to slaughter them. You're going to be out. It's done. It was after Russia saved him from a Western-sponsored color revolution coup, call it whatever you want. And that was one of my great videos. That's my message to, including Orban, anybody who's not in the US, see the reality for what it is. And Africa, I think, is beginning to see it. Vyacheslav Volodin this week, he's the leader, I think, the chairman of the State Duma, the Russian parliament, said nobody's going to buy US weapons because they've proven completely incapable of fighting against Russia. And I think he's right. And if people think Africa hasn't noticed this, first, Russia is back. You can't just slap it off. All of these beautiful weapons, the media hype, the training of NATO, the sophisticated stuff that's supposed to be unbeatable has turned out to be extremely beatable. You just have to follow a couple of Telegram channels to see the viral video. True enough. We can go the viral video of one T-90 tank taking out like a column of 10 tanks. It went viral. People couldn't stop it. It's like that, full of suka, blia, all of the swearing that the Russian service.
It was like Ghost of Kiev, only it was real.
Yeah, it's actually unaltered drone footage. So make of that what you like. But what's happened in Africa is one after the other, especially 3 countries said, yeah, we're done with France. Come on, we're with Russia. We got to rise up. That's my initial take. We can go into details. We are talking about, obviously, Niger. But before that was Mali, Burkina Faso, very important neighboring big countries who are in a semi-alliance now. They're talking about a federation, which they actually had in the 1950s and failed at the time. But I'm seeing a glimmer of hope all over the place. I just hope it doesn't turn into all-out war as the latest news.
So Africa has been a colonial battleground for, before during the Cold War, of course, it was definitely a colonial battleground. So there was, principled socialists would come to power like Lumumba and Sankara, and then they would get, cooed or murdered or assassinated with impunity by the West. And the West would prop up, their cronies that would just facilitate the mass exploitation of the country. And once the Cold War was over, that mass exploitation has continued. So the West is massively exploiting the resources and people of Africa. And they're scared because they feel that China and Russia are a threat to this real sweet deal that they have, where they can just rape that continent and use all their wealth for, to further the benefit of the Western companies, Western corporations, etc. So, this thing that they did with France and its colonies and the franc. I mean, I've heard it explained. I'm not going to be able to do a very good job of explaining it, but it's such a freaking Ponzi scheme. I mean, it's like they allow them, they like sell them French currencies, which they use, and then in return, France gets their gold and actual stuff. And then they're buying the privilege of using this French currency. And it doesn't make any sense for these countries in Africa to do that. They're just being mercilessly exploited. And so people are getting sick of it. People in Africa are getting sick of it. But it's a heated, it's a huge battle because the U.S. has AFRICOM. All those other countries are willing to kill and die with impunity. They're gonna overthrow, any government that steps out of line. And we saw that there was a recent coup in which country was it that had the pro-West coup, and the guy that was doing deals with China was out. I forget what government that was. That was not that long ago. But we just saw in Niger the opposite happen. So the pro-West guy was just taken out by somebody that is now saying, "Hey, we really need to strengthen our ties with Russia and China."
Yeah, I mean, let me give some. Go, Carlo.
I want to thank Fox 2232 for his lucid comment. I think he's right on the money. I wanted to talk a little bit about Niger. Look, Niger.
Yeah, my guess too, Fox.
Is rich in uranium, and most of that uranium was going to France to power their nuclear power stations, plants. Because France, I think, is 70% nuclear, and so that's a huge asset that France has just lost. But it's also a huge asset that China has just won, because it was the last link in the Sahel, in crossing the Sahel, that China has huge Belt and Road Initiative plans for. Once they cross the Sahel with all of its tributaries going north and south, that will link all of Africa. It will just boost trade monumentally. Now, I know that Nigeria and the other members of ECOWAS have come out and they don't like this coup in Niger. Now, we had Hamzat on, and he was a backer of Tinubu. And that was the one thing that concerned me about Tinubu, was that he had made statements that were more or less not in favor of China's Belt and Road Initiative. But this is huge in that regard, because this sort of solidifies the whole of it, and it's done it with the help of the Wagner Group. And that's why Prigozhin has been resurrected in Africa, because the Wagner Group was definitely behind the coup in Mali. Well, there weren't even coups, really. The people just wanted France out. They wanted the U.S. out. Look, the irony is that the U.S. created Boko Haram. If you go back through the pedigree, it goes back to Mujahideen, back to Afghanistan. That's where these groups got their boost. You know, I don't want whatever you call them. The people that the people in the Congo who are now attacking the Central African Republic and relying on the Wagner Group to rescue Chinese engineers that are captured by these groups, which you can trace back to the Central Intelligence Agency.
By the way, Where Prigozhin surfaced, that was at the recent huge Russia-Africa summit, and he was talking on the sidelines with the Central African Republic's president. I thought that was something very interesting for someone who committed a coup, a traitor to the country. He was just there in casual dad clothes, man. He was just there.
Yeah, and he did a great service to both Central African Republic and the Chinese. So it's huge. It's big. This Niger thing is.
There's this image.
But don't expect DC to lie down. They got more shit up their sleeves.
There's a cartoon image of Uncle Sam carrying a stick figure, propping it up, and then shooting a town down, and then picking it up and taking it somewhere else. And so that's kind of indicative of how the U.S. operates. They create these terrorists, and then they use them as a pretext to get in there militarily and take over politically. So
let's not forget that while there's a U.S. base in Niger, I don't care that much for the details right now. This is mostly the bread basket or energy basket or raw resource market for Europe. And that's what's interesting. It already spawned some conspiracy theories, which I'll warn you about when I discuss it. But to give context to what we've been saying, the last European conference was, I think, 1839. You can correct me later if I'm wrong. This is from memory, the Berlin Conference. That's where they drew the lines. That's why that's so straight. This belongs to you. That goes to the Portuguese. This is Belgian, Congo. And that's what they did. This is all ours. And the franc, you said, it's important. This is not the French franc. It's not the French currency. It's the CFR franc. Best guy in the world to talk about this with or watch about is Richard Medhurst. He's the Syrian lad that speaks French. He just knows the region perfectly. And it's in 14 countries. It was decreed by Charles de Gaulle in 1955 on the end of World War II. And it's still 14 countries. Okay. And I'm just going to do two little illustrations. One was provided us by President Museveni of the Ugandan Republic of Uganda, and he was at the summit in St. Petersburg talking to Vladimir Putin and explained neocolonialism in simple terms. When it comes to coffee, it's a 460 billion industry globally. A lot of that comes from Africa, but they got $2.3 billion out of that. They're the raw resource. And he said that has to end. We have to add the value. We have to create the commodity because they just take in everything and nothing happens to us. And I did most of my research on the nations. You already mentioned uranium, which is the main thing in Niger. That's why France is in a panic because it powers France and many other European states. Not us. We got Rosatom. We are provided fuel by the Russians even to this day, but not most of Europe. But Mali was the first. 2 years ago, I read that the French have been booted out of Mali, and this was the headline. They found a new home in Niger, and that's about to really drastically change. Now, what is Mali famous for? Gold, enormous amounts of gold. And what they did was, France. It has the fourth largest gold reserves in the entire world with zero mines, no production on the territory of France. Whereas Mali has 860 gold mines, guys. It produces 50 tons of gold a year and it has no reserves. That is what this whole thing looks like. That is what they're sick of it. And it's been exploited, this resource, which is gold, for like 40 years. It didn't build schools. It didn't build high-speed rail. It didn't build infrastructure. 80% of the people, which is Niger, sorry to switch around, don't have electricity while they're powering France, and they live under $2 a day. Of course, the coup is popular. I mean,
thank you, Ben, for putting the actual numbers on what I was trying to describe. It's just merciless exploitation of the people and the resources. And it's just a raping of that whole continent by the West, and that continues on, and it's being threatened. China and Russia are threatening to stop the rape of Africa by the West, and so the West is angry, and the West is going to fight back. I wanted to plug your little summaries that you do every week, Ben. They're very good. I learn a lot from them. I can't wait for your website to go up, where everybody can read along to
getting closer and closer. And I've saved these all the way back to the beginnings of these shows. Sorry.
But you put in some quotes there from the UK and from France saying, hey, if our access to this uranium is threatened, we won't hesitate to invade militarily. We will invade Niger. I mean, we'll invade Mali. That's why we call this the battleground. So if somebody was asking about the title of our program. So Battleground Africa, that's going, there's a real hot battleground going on. We're seeing back and forth coups.
And, it's being ripped away from the old colonial peoples, and they hate it, because if you look at the city of London, if you look at the beautiful city of Paris, all of that was built based on this stolen wealth. It's just well known in Africa. Right. Maybe you don't know that much if you're in Europe, in the US, but that is what it was. And you mentioned China and Russia. Now, China is the material partner. China has been building in Africa, even if their workers and scientists get sometimes bullied, sometimes killed. That's the builder state. But Russia is even more significant. Vladimir Putin said at the summit that back in the Soviet days, we spent a lot of stuff, a lot of aid, a lot of money on Africa. And at the time, there were some people who disagreed, like, what is this good for? What is this good for us? And I disagreed today. He said, Vladimir Putin disagreed, because it has earned us this unending well of goodwill. And they just renamed the Patrice Lumumba Friendship University, which was renamed to something else, back to Patrice Lumumba Friendship University, by the way, in Moscow. He wants to rekindle this tradition. I mean, every day, all of the news I see, it's re-embracing what really in the 1990s was just slammed the door on, which was the Soviet legacy. And that brings together the might that you see Ukraine absolutely failing on the battlefront, and the economic power of China. And everybody says, well, we'll be better off for the last fucking 100 years. Just look at us. Look at how we live. What's changed? What's been better? I wanted to say that. So.
And I think this situation is different, too, because, the United States completely devastated Libya. It was the most progressive country in Africa.
And what did Gaddafi want? What did he want to do?
He just wanted to get out from under the petrodollar, the world currency, which was fatal to Saddam Hussein too, by the way.
Yep.
And several other leaders who professed their desire to do that.
He not only wanted a gold-backed Pan-African Lira, but an actual Pan-African federation, as in the model of the United States. Well,
like Nasser did back in the 50s. But they didn't have the power then. Now they've got the power, because look, Sudan is in a state of civil war, because Russia was going to build a port on the Red Sea, and so but it's not the same thing anymore. It's just not the same thing anymore. Right? Look at Eritrea. Look at Ethiopia. Ethiopia, they defeated the Tigray in the north, and they allied. They settled their differences with Eritrea. I mean, those locks are happening, and they could not happen without Russia and China behind them with that kind of confidence. $23 billion in debt forgiveness, real debt forgiveness in Africa.
Yes,
genuine.
Free grain. Hello.
Not this. I don't remember that. What was that pop singer's name who went around getting debt forgiveness from the West?
Oh, U2.
U2.
Bono. When Bono was still a sane person, yeah.
Yeah, and none of it ever happened. All they did, the only thing that happened was they might have had a kind of debt forgiveness where the austerity programs kicked in. Okay, we'll forgive the debt if you do away with all your hospitals, if you don't educate your people, if you don't give them electricity and clean water. Sure, we'll forgive your debt. If you let us exploit this or exploit that.
No,
we actually want debt forgiveness.
We actually want a rise in living standards for fucking change if we provide everything. Yeah.
And the work projects that the Chinese have already introduced into Africa are enormous.
And fundamentally changed living standards, changed the material reality already.
The Great Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia, please just go look at it, folks. It's a startling transformation. And so anyway,
so how capable?
Go, Billy Bob.
I was going to say how capable is the West of wrecking everything that China and Russia are trying to accomplish? So that's the question.
That's the thing. It looks like not that much without nukes, and they feel it. It's changing.
So what was the name of Hamzat, right? Hamzat was on.
Yeah.
And he came on twice. The first time he said there's no U.S. military bases in Nigeria. And then he came back and said, okay, here's what happened. The U.S. said, if you want us to help you with these terrorists, you need to let us do it. We're not going to let you do it. We're not going to help you do it. We're going to have to come in and do it ourselves. So we're going to need our base, and we're going to, then we can do it. So, now Wagner maybe provides an option for dealing with these Western-backed terrorists. The U.S. doesn't tell the Nigerian government, I don't think, hey, we're creating these terrorists, we're funding them, off the books in our black operations, and now we're coming to you to say, hey, let us take care of them so we can get our military boots on the ground. They don't tell them that, but Wagner provides an option for them. You don't have to, have your sovereignty all walked all over. If you just, let, these, what are they? Russian aligned mercenaries, because they're a mercenary group, but they're very close, obviously, with the Russian government. But
I mean, basically, right now, they're integrated into the Russian armed forces. It's safe to say that ever since the longest night, the
reason they were brought into existence, though, was because it was against the Russian law to have the Russian troops outside of Russia, right?
Yeah, something but like now they've been sanctioned to hell, and they're living, breathing, thriving. Who cares anymore? We can be there officially. Fuck it. I think that's the thinking.
Yeah, well, I mean, the reality is changing. It's adapting to the circumstances, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, of course.
Can I jump in? I'd like to address Ursula V. left this beautiful comment about Colonel Gaddafi shining today. Thank you for bringing it back. And it's not just him. You're very, very right, obviously. But these three countries, I spent the weekend just finding out everything about. The leaders have invoked Patrice Lumumba, Kwame Nkrumah. They have invoked all of these people, and it's in their spirit that we should rise and actually break the chains that bind. This is all over the place. I want to add one thing. It's not just the Russian flags that are flown at these parades. It's mostly that when it comes to Niger. But Mali, the first to break free of the triangle region, it's Mali, Burkina Faso, and then Niger. This little very, very French, very Frank Afrique region had already enlisted the help of Iran to fight the terrorists. They have been the previously most sanctioned country in the world, and they also breathe freely now because everybody's under sanction. Who cares? We can do whatever we want because of the sanctions. We've taken them. It was a body blow. It was painful for a minute. Now we can just take it. I think like things have fundamentally.
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say that people in the EU, 98% of them, just don't know that how dramatically things have changed. Like everything has shifted, and they're just unaware, uninformed.
It's like Nkrumah famously said: "We don't look east and we don't look west. We look forward." And I think China and Russia are the ones who punch. I mean, obviously, the Wagner Group is a parallel to AFRICOM, which is that's a security issue.
Yeah.
Now the Russians do want a taste; they want an economic taste too. But
of course, look, China has its own interests too, but they're not going to do it through debt slavery. They're not going to do it through horrible.
Right, exactly. And now they've got China. China is the alternative to the IMF and the World Bank.
Yeah,
and that kind of slop. I mean,
that's the point I wanted to jump in on, Carlo. I'm sorry for stepping all over your, but
go ahead.
So an alternative, right? So during the Cold War, Ben brought up how they were giving lip service to being non-aligned, neither east nor west, and there was a very, very powerful non-aligned movement. They didn't want to pick a side because they saw that by picking a side, you're going to be boxed
along
in.
with Tito's Yugoslavia, right? He was the one to found the movement. Yes.
I believe you. I'm not certain, but I'm sure that's correct. And India was in it, and a lot of the African countries. But after the Cold War ended, there was only one game in town, right? The West declared victory, and they were the only place you could go for any kind of aid or development. And because of that, the West held all the cards, and they did everything with strings attached. And those strings attached, as I tried to explain earlier, were no different than the old colonial times. Like it's just such an exploitative system. And so China and Russia now, they have this option that you don't have to do this strings attached, which really is going to result in zero net development for your country. So China is actually building hospitals, roads, schools, dams, highways, railways, infrastructure that the people can use that's going to bring development and prosperity. And with that is going to come peace. And that's going to be great for China. That's going to be great for Africa. It's not going to be great for the West. And that's why they're going to try their best to violently destroy it. And so that's the battleground, again, that we're going to be watching in the next 5-10 years. And we're going to be rooting for humanity. We're going to be rooting for China. We're going to be rooting for Russia. And we're going to want the West to stop it and to start behaving like rational, humans and not bloodthirsty exploiters.
True. I mean, what had to happen? This is how Ukraine comes into this game. You had to have this spectacular showdown. I think you did, because as you mentioned in the 1990s, as Francis Fukuyama said, history has ended. He's retracted that since then. Just like Gordon Chang, the China Duma, who just put the decline of China to the rest of this century. It was supposed to be in 2001. If you read the guy, he's insane. Anyway, it was the only game in time. It was most of the GDP in the world. But now, guys, the BRICS has already, in GDP size, especially in size of people, outperformed the G7. It was supposed to be the people with the most influence in the world. You guys are in the US. I bet you're feeling some price rises, but I think it's about, your inflation is about half that of most of this Western continental Europe. It's absolutely brutal here. And that's when people think about, well, we were promised, prosperity in the EU and everything's going to get better. Nothing did in 30 years. And now we're paying for this Ukraine shit show. More and more people are beginning to think like this. And what we've also learned from Africa, the supposed decolonial movement, it never actually happened, did it? Nothing much has changed. It really needed to actually bring into the 21st century a real decolonial movement, a proper one, a sincere one, but because it didn't happen. I had one more thought, but I think I lost track of that one.
It is very difficult to maintain thoughts in this platform. It's a struggle.
I will say, China is really the link, really the force that's driving this. I mean, kudos to Putin for taking Yeltsin's debacle and turning it around. Obviously, that's why he's hated so much. I mean, and when you take the big picture of Russia and the Soviet period, they went from a feudal country to a modern society in 70 years, maybe less, even less. And China, since 1949, has done a similar thing, just in their own different way. And China's Belt and Road Initiative is probably the most important economic initiative for a millennium.
In the entire world.
Right
in
now,
the
entire world. Biggest trading partner by a whole lot. There's over 10,000 Chinese corporations building things in Africa. 2/3 of all the employees are Africans themselves. So it's exactly right. And then as far as loans go, so the loans from China have no strings attached. They're always way better as far as interest rates go, and they engage in a lot of loan forgiveness. There's a great little 12-minute YouTube video from that Greek guy,
Yanis Varoufakis.
Explaining to some woman who's terrified of China exactly China's approach to business. And Yanis, of course, is a little bit of a milquetoast liberal socialist, but he gets it pretty good. I love that China clip, and I've shared it with a lot of people. And plus, he's got gravitas because liberals like him and listen to him. So the fact that he speaks truth there is powerful, and it's good to share. But it is tremendous. The Belt and Road Initiative. It's tremendous, and it's great for humanity. And it's just ridiculous that the West sees it as a threat and wants to destroy it. It just tells you everything you need to know. It's the continuation of class struggle.
I have no idea how Italy is going to survive without it, because the Meloni, the shouting Italian lady, has been wined and dined by Biden, and immediately she left the Belt and Road Initiative. So good luck to her. Best of wishes. And now, of course, she supports the beautiful Libera Democrazia in Ukraine, which was fantastic to me. That clip also went viral for the wrong reasons. I don't know how they're going to survive. But on the point of China, every time I do proper deep reads, it's just insane. You can't imagine. I'm doing for my dad a proper long deep dive email just on the automotive industry. I'll share with you the rough outlines. It's nothing you've ever seen in economic history, like ever. It is ridiculous in the last just 10 years. What China has been doing, building the Belt and Road Initiative, is obviously just US money, US, stocks and bonds, and we're just going to put it into real stuff. Goodbye. Very, very well thought out.
China's never asked for a structural adjustment loan like
IMF,
the West.
Yeah.
And that's the setup. You loan these countries the money. That all the money goes to Western companies who do the work or are supposed to do the work, fulfill the contracts, like in Iraq. They don't. Or if they do, it's shabby work. And then they take the money, and then the country can't pay the loan back. And so structural adjustment loans kick in. And that's where that's where the austerity programs come from. You're going to have to cut back on your health care. You're going to have
schools,
to cut back on your education.
Sell these national assets for pennies on the dollar to us.
Right, sell your national assets. Yep. All your utilities have to go to some U.S. corporation, including your water. And now that's happening to Europe to a certain degree. And I say, a tough break, Europe.
Here's where I'm going to give you the content warning of conspiracy theory or some sort of theory on the internet. It's making the rounds. It's not official, nothing like that. But apparently, the people who took power in Niger, they're obviously very anti-French, but they have very long history of very good relations with the US. And someone floated this. Look, the Nord Stream fucked up German industry like forever, for at least 10 years. You can see it. It's just deindustrialized. It really is day by day. And now, for some strange circumstance, it looks to be like France is going to be left without most of its nuclear power. And it looks like fingerprints of the US, no matter how they deny it. I'm not going to say this is the real what's happening. It's something that someone brought up, and it made me think that, isn't it interesting? That's all I wanted to add.
I wanted to address some of the China, the anti-China narratives of the West. So one of them is debt trap diplomacy. So the U.S. obviously is the creator and, wielder of this debt trap diplomacy, but they accuse China. So they project what they do onto China.
All the time.
And I want to point out that The Atlantic actually ran an article a couple of years ago, an admission. And when The Atlantic does something and they tell the truth, it's an admission against interest, right? So when one of the establishment press says something it doesn't follow the narrative, you can bet that it's true, and it has more weight because it's what's termed an admission against interest. So this admission against interest, it had two of the world's greatest experts, Western experts, saying China does not engage in debt trap diplomacy. China has never seized any national asset because a country failed to pay off its debt. It's just never happened. And so a lot of people bring up the port in that one country. I forget what country the port was. And they totally misrepresent it. But that's, again, the media just creating these false narratives and banking on the ignorance of their readers, that their readers don't really know what's going on. And they lie and they mislead and they get people to believe that, China is just as bad as the U.S. They're just doing what the U.S. is. They're just the latest empire out there. And that kind of an attitude is just so fundamentally wrong on so many levels. But it's important to make that clear.
Russian diplomats call that the State Department mirror effect. They actually have a term for it, and they use it. And you mentioned The Atlantic from Alex Christoforou, who has some weight in these matters. I know that's read. That's a serious magazine by foreign ministers, by the big players in the world. So I think something like an admission like that might actually have consequence. I want to put it as clearly as I can. Do you guys remember the British Empire? Remember what they did to India, not just under Churchill? India had the best textile industry, massive weaving plants everywhere, okay? They went in, they destroyed it, they burned it to the ground, and you're going to export natural resources for us, for London, and we'll weave it into nice suits, goodbye, and you're going to suffer. And if you think about it that way, it hasn't much changed. That is the Western plan. If you look at Africa, raw resource, bring it out. I don't care how you live, you can shit in the streets. That's Plan West.
Yeah.
Plan East is We should all share. We should all lift. We all deserve to have this kind of lifestyle, which, even in poverty-stricken Hungary, I have a roof above my head. I have the aircon going. I have food, Not all Africans can say that. There's 2 million children without fucking shoes in the world.
Somebody on my Facebook Messenger shared with me a video from an African mine, and I think it was in the Congo, and just these little kids just working in the mud, and that's right now. That's modernity.
Yeah, it's not archived.
Well,
yeah.
China's trying to fix that.
I do want to leap in there and say, actually, that's a kind of false picture, because there's a huge mining infrastructure owned by Western Europe and the U.S. in all of Africa. I mean, the big dredges and all that, they're there, but the press seems to want to show these kids working in the mine. Now, Paul E. wrote in, where is it the railway from China through Kazakhstan via Turkey, Italy, and France to end up in London? Well, first of all, that route would be sanctioned so heavily.
Well, if anybody can build a bridge to London, it'll be China. So
but it will be. But now the new route is north-south through Afghanistan and Iran.
The big north-south,
and even going around the Suez Canal, not involving the Suez Canal.
Yes, through northern Thailand. Yes.
Yeah. So right. So that's happening because it's not under so much of the Western economic and military purview. So that can happen. The route that I've seen pictures of the route that she's talking about, but right now, given the economic and political and military situation, that's an impossibility. So I just wanted to express that.
Yeah, good. On that point, by the way, great comment, Paulie. Thank you for leaving it.
Yeah.
The Belt and Road Initiative is based on the old Silk Road, basically, and that goes to Palmyra, Syria. And it was thought about maybe how to connect Europe before the SMO, before politics got very, very difficult between East and West. We still have Chinese trains with Chinese goods arriving in Budapest. We actually have them. I don't think they'll ever arrive in London, France, Spain, Italy. I don't think it's going to happen in the near future until people, I don't know, sober up to the west of us. That's all.
Go tell Marco Polo.
Yeah.
So are you ready to change the subject or not?
Well, let's talk about the BRICS summit. So there's going to be a BRICS summit in South Africa.
Launch with the quote, please. That's the best quote.
It was decided on July 19th that Putin would not attend in person. Lavrov is going to go in his place. Putin will be there via video. But, there's too much shenanigans. So South Africa is a member of the International Criminal Court. We can touch on for a minute this other propaganda offensive that the West is just, utilizing in their war on the minds of humanity, which is basically that, Russia, Putin is a war criminal because he was trying to take kids out of the war zone. And for that, he deserves to be locked up at The Hague and given the who got the Milosevic treatment. Dying in prison. So that's the hope. That was, it was a vain hope, of course, but that's what it's all about. So they just make up these fake allegations, and they utilize their platforms of mass communication to shove them down everybody's throat. And it just coincides with all the other bullshit that they've shoved down everybody's throat for the last 2 decades. And so a lot of people aren't, smart enough to see through it. So they think, oh, Putin is actually a war criminal and I should support the International Criminal Court. Well, guess what? Your government doesn't even support the International Criminal Court. Your government says if the International Criminal Court takes a U.S. citizen, we're going to go in and break them out, using our military. We're not going to allow that. We're not going to. So, Russia is no different. They're not a signatory to the ICC. South Africa, unfortunately, was foolish enough to sign up, but it's just revealed itself to be such a sham and bullshit hoax that everybody just needs to drop out of it. That's what I'll
bring in the quote at a later moment, but yeah, just on the ICC. No, that was great. To introduce people, it was basically we had a friend of the show on this show who was part of the legal defense of Milosevic, who never made it to trial because already at that time the whole
Christopher Black
Christopher Black, yes.
Right,
Ethnic cleansing genocide idea was getting shaky, and it wouldn't have been proven in court. But other than him, the white guy, 99% of people who got arrest warrants from the ICC were black Africans, ladies and gentlemen. That is the truth. So in Africa today, there is Western influence, obviously. I just don't know how they haven't revoked this criminal, stupid stuff. But let's get on to the quote, which comes from Julius Malema, who's not the president, but a high-ranking MP in the ruling party of maybe the leader of the ruling party in South Africa, who said, "We call on the president of the People's Republic of China, India, Brazil, not to come to the BRICS summit in solidarity with the President Putin. They must say, you touch one of us and you touch all of us." I thought that was just the perfect summation of what the BRICS should be, even though, there's opportunism in there. We can see it in India. We can see it in other places, but it really should show a united front.
Can you mute your microphone?
It's definitely a I like the thought process behind it, but nobody's not going, right? So Russia's still going. It's just that Putin will be there with video conferencing.
Yeah.
But if they didn't allow Russia to go, then of course, but that's their hope. Their hope is that the forces that are not united in BRICS are gonna tear BRICS apart, just like we're hoping that the forces that together create NATO are gonna end up ripping NATO apart. But it's
they're tearing themselves apart, that's for sure, Billy Bob, at this moment. Yeah.
Right. But it's like an us against them thing, but they are the ones that are against humanity, and then we're the ones wanting peace, prosperity, and coexistence. So it's like we have similar tactics. We have similar hopes, but our objectives are diametrically opposed. And so I just.
By the way,
I'm not sure what's going on with poor Carlo. Everything all right, Carlo?
Something has come up. So,
can you leave the show and go back?
Can I leave the show for about 10 minutes?
We'll catch you later. We'll catch you later. Okay. We can wind it down and bring it to a nice landing because.
No, I have something else I'd like to talk about. But
go.
But go ahead. Just get.
I just wanted to say that I congratulated Putin in writing at the time. He was the first white man to be arrested by the ICC. Had a warrant from the ICC, but two other people have now warrants on them. One is something Belova, who was the human rights or child rights ombudsman under Putin, and the third one is Lukashenko, the leader of Belarus. They all have outstanding warrants from the ICC for them. And Carlo, go.
Oh, I guess he went.
Okay, I thought he was going to say something now.
I thought he wanted to say something as well. His wife maybe had other plans for him. That's okay. But yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, so essentially, the ICC is nothing more than a tool of Western imperialism, and its whole point and purpose is to support imperialism and the maintenance of the imperialist order that is on its way out. And so that's what we're doing here at the Blowback Roundtable. We're exposing imperial decline. We're rooting for imperial decline. And it's obvious that, it's spiraling down the drain. So
yeah, it's shown it to most of the world who are paying attention. Europe has showed it. If it just confiscates those Russian assets, there's more capital flight. No one's going to invest here. It's not going to be safe. And they don't seem to have grasped this reality that these tools they relied on, maybe they were reliable 10, 20 years ago. They're being exposed as absolutely fraudulent and not what's in the writing, which includes the UN, by the way, not just the ICC. It isn't what was promised. Maybe I'd say that as a final thought.
Well, the UN, I mean, it's got some independence, but the US has such outweighed influence. It's got very disproportionate influence over the UN, although the UN still manages to be somewhat independent. I think the U.S. needs to. I would like the UN a lot more if the U.S. didn't have so much influence.
I mean, come on!
The Security Council can be vetoed by
the big motherland monument in Kiev. It has this beautiful Soviet coat of arms on it, and it's being dismantled. It started on Sunday. Right now, to put a trizub on it, which is the trident that Kiev has, their little symbol on it.
Like George killing the dragon, and they're going to change that.
The Trizub is going to be on there. It's made of European steel because obviously for some reason Ukraine media said that theirs was inferior. While this is happening, UNESCO sent its little detachment that arrived in Odessa to check out the damage done by the Russian aggression on that church where another fucking, sorry, like I swear today, S-300 air defense missile fell. And that's what they're doing. The UNESCO, that's the world's cultural heritage thing, part of a UN branch.
Yeah. Did they ever visit the trade union building? Probably not.
I wonder if they did. 10 years ago that happened, man. And I mean, if you're going to destroy everything that the Soviets built, this will be my final thought. Start with the power plants, the steel mills, the schools, the housing. Start with that, little Ukraine. See what you're left with. No black soil. Everything belongs to BlackRock. Good luck.
Okay, we covered a lot. Thank you, Ben. Carlo, thank you for joining us. We had a bunch of live viewers today, which always gets my energy up. So thanks everybody for watching. We're going to be here on Thursday for Foreign Policy Review, and then next week Tuesday for our 7th Blowback Roundtable. Thanks everybody. We'll see you soon. I'm going to hit in broad.